Good evening, everyone. This meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now called to order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Mayor Buck?
Here.
Councilors Winland? Burdick?
Here.
Here. Raff?
Here.
Mboop?
Here.
Mans?
Here.
And Wynn.
Here.
Okay, we're going to start with the pledge. Councilor Burdick is going to lead us in the pledge tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Whoops, wrong.
Thank you, Councilor Burdick. That was great.
You're sworn in again.
That's what I get for not wanting to fumble my words.
That was perfect. We're going to start tonight just with a brief statement as we invite folks to join us in our upcoming community kickoff around community policing or community dialogue. This past spring, our city engaged in a dialogue around community policing, and as a council, we understand that while we represent everyone in Lake Oswego, the systems and structures within our nation as a whole have excluded Black, Indigenous people of color from sharing their lived experiences in a way that affects positive change within their communities. And Lake Oswego is just a microcosm of this reality. So we're grateful to have a talented and dedicated police department. And we also know that we can do more to improve our law enforcement practices to ensure that all people who live, work, and visit in our community feel safe. And so in that vein, we are going to lead this conversation on community policing with race, which means that we invite all members of our community to participate. We will also intentionally seek feedback from our communities of color. And doing that doesn't diminish anyone's voice, but instead seeks to uplift the experiences of those who have been marginalized as a result of historical inequities. So we're inviting everyone as a council to join us next Tuesday, a week from today, on March 9th at 5:30 p.m. This is an opportunity to share your hopes and insights about community policing. Your input will help us to evaluate our existing policies and procedures with the goal of just and equitable enforcement outcomes for everyone in Lake Oswego. Pre-registration is required. You go to the city's website, right on the homepage, there's a tile with a link to this event. We hope that you will all join us. And our next order of business is public comment. Ms. Linder, do we have anyone for public comment?
Yes, Mr. Ormsby is joining the meeting now.
Okay.
Mr. Ormsby, if you're ready to unmute.
Got it? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
We sure can.
Okay, I don't see a camera on me, but I'm still calling from Phoenix area. My concerns, I put them into my request of the city recorder, Carrie Linder, this afternoon. Also, I just sent you an article from MIT, and my concern is, and it's universally applicable to a lot of initiatives that you have, and that is the use of plus codes and finding stuff where stuff is. I'm advocating that mainly because you got to know where stuff is down to a pretty good degree of resolution. And also I'm very, very concerned, or have become concerned, with dams on both the Tualatin River and Clackamas rivers. You've got problems down in foothills, and again, plus codes help alleviate this, or at least expose it to a degree that has been unheard of to this date. Also, with respect to the Clackamas River, you've got you're putting about what, $200,000 into the pump station. Where is that? You can get at it by plus codes. Affordable housing, plus codes can be used relative to Boone's Ferry, to shopping, and to parks and whatnot, to see explicitly where stuff is. You're not addressing this. Also, the transit issues on Boone's Ferry and Lake Grove, it's tough to get out there at any hour of the day. Your witching hour when the line service ends is about 5 p.m. Pacific time. So you got problems with that site. I hope you can resolve them at some point in the future. Thank you very much. Skip.
Thank you, Mr. Ormsby. Any other public comment? Okay.
No, Mayor.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda is a public hearing to make an adjustment to the biennium budget. Mr. Boone, will you please walk us through the hearing procedure?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The adoption of resolution is a legislative decision for the council, which is a policy decision within the discretion of City Council. The public hearing process begins with a presentation by staff, and then testimony can be received from the public. Individuals allowed up to 5 minutes. Recognized neighborhood association, homeowner association, government agencies, and other incorporated public interest organizations are allowed up to 10 minutes. These time limits do not include time taken from questions from the council. Any person may cede his or her time to another, but in no case shall any person's time be increased to greater than 10 minutes. I would ask the council members to please declare if you have any financial conflicts of interest. Nope, seeing none. Then Finance Director Sean Cross has the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Sean Cross, the Finance Director. This is a pretty straightforward budget supplement. It's really just trying to get City Hall the funding to get it completed. There were two issues that we're working through here. The first one is just the timing of the construction, the costs. We budgeted much of it to be done at the beginning of 2020 or 21-22, but it's actually moving along quicker. So we need it actually this fiscal year. It's still on budget. It's just that's the other. And the other item was the North Anchor properties. When we built the budget about 2 years ago, we thought that we were going to receive about $1.5 million from the sale of the North Anchor properties to then be able to reinvest into City Hall. Not that we can't do that in the future, but because City Hall's going to be done in a month, we kind of need to get it paid for. So this is kind of more of a backstop. So the general fund would be able to loan the money to LORA until it does its properties. If the LORA board chooses to reinvest those funds into the City Hall project. So we can do that, but either way, the general fund still has to pay the contractor to finish the project. So that's pretty much in the nutshell what this is. So if you have any questions, I can.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Cross? Okay, well, you did such a good job in the report. We will now open the public hearing. Ms. Linder, do we have any requests, folks to testify?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Well, that is it for the public hearing. It is now closed.
I move to adopt resolution 21-04.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Okay. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Buck,
Yes.
Councilors Winland,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Raff,
Of course. Yes.
Boop. Boop.
Yes.
Thanks. Vance
Yes.
and Win.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Todd,
Cross.
if you can, every time you come to a meeting, say that the projects are ahead of schedule. If you can just start everything with that, I think it would just be really great.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a study session on City Council social media guidelines. And to walk us through this item this evening, welcome this evening to the meeting. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Madison Thiesing, Assistant to the City Manager. So for tonight, I am presenting the proposed guidelines for City Council members' social media platforms. So for background on how we got here and why I'm here today, at the City Council Goal Setting Retreat in January, Council requested staff to return with a social media policy or guidelines for members of the City Council to consider. This was back This is in January. Since then, staff has researched for city council specific social media guidelines and just online communications. We had reached out to the Oregon League of Cities, neighboring cities, as well as through our national networks and associations. This includes the Government Social Media Community, the International City County Management Association, and engaging local government leaders. So we tried to have a wide breadth of examples, and it actually ended up being that there were very few examples. So we found most examples being social media policies and procedures being related to the city organization or employees specifically, but very few were directed to elected officials. So of the ones that we were able to find that were geared to elected officials, they were either heavy policy, heavy direction as a this is how it should look like, or it was on the opposite end of the spectrum, and it was more about general best practices and more of a very general way of looking at communications and as a guidelines. So after looking at the examples, staff felt it was best to pair the two in the proposed guidelines. So that's what you see forward. The guidelines as proposed tonight have been reviewed by our internal communications team, as well as the city attorney, city recorder, city manager's office, so, city manager Bennett, and our IT director. I think with the breadth of review, I think it really highlights that there were many facets to consider when we were creating the policy and guidelines, a lot more than I think I even realized going into it. So we had to look through it the lens of good communications, but also public records retention, public meetings, public access, and just simply good governance and how we present ourselves as an organization as well. So before I turn over to the guidelines and to just walk through the outline, one thing I think the challenge that we experienced when we were creating these is that this is still a very much an evolving field of public policy and governance of social media when it's related to government. So as you might be aware, public policy sometimes is a little bit farther behind rapid changing developments and evolving technology. And so that's kind of what we experience, is that we haven't yet had as many policies or examples to look to. So what we tried to pair is what we know is required by Oregon state statutes, as well as what is just good practices. So Carrie, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. This is the first time I've had a PowerPoint for you all, so bear with me. Okay. So as I shared, the guidelines are separated between two big buckets, and I would describe it as the legal perspective and then the best practices. And the goal with the guidelines is that they're broad enough to apply to all applicable forms of online community platforms and communications. So this includes websites, web pages, blogs, social media platforms. And right now we were thinking of it in the lens of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but at the end of the day, social media platforms are popping up all the time. So we wanted to get into the weeds of TikTok and all that. We just felt it was best to keep it pretty high level and broad. In the guidelines, we tried to strike the balance between explaining the legal considerations while also providing the platform to have counsel have the freedom of expression and have a voice on these online platforms as well. And I would describe the legal considerations as the should follows, and then the best practices and tips are the nice to know and just as staff recommendations. So the guidelines start with an introduction as a purpose, as you saw in this council report. The biggest thing at the beginning is that as a speaker, you are not a council member is not the spokesperson for the city unless designated. That's the same type of distinction we make also as city staff. Not all city staff speaks to the media as a representative of the city. And then going into the legal consideration being public meetings and records requirements. So I'm going to try my best to summarize the legal considerations, but I do have City Attorney Boone to help me out on this as well. For the online council communications and online presence, it is that all counselors are subject to the same Oregon state statutes as in-person and more formal written communications as well as meetings. So that specifically as when we're talking about online social media, that's for public meetings law and public records requirement. And I know this went over in the city council onboarding, but it was just to have it all captured on this one document as well. So to cover those two legal or state statutes specifically. So public meetings are idea that by posting content and if other counselors comment on it, that could be considered a quorum with fellow counselors. And then that would constitute public meeting. So we would have to have records of it. We'd have to notice it. It would be as a formal process, even if it's on Facebook. The second component of that is then the public records law and requirements. So social media content, online conversations, blogs, things like that are, if it's with the lens of the council member and it's in related to the council's position and the topics of city business, that is also subject to public records law. And currently in the guidelines as it was proposed is that we are proposing that the responsibility of public records and maintaining public records lives with the counselor creating that public record and content specifically. That would mean that the public record has to be on the retention schedule. And if someone was to ask for that information, a council member would have to provide that through a public records request if it was asked of. And this is part of what our council discussion will be this evening through those questions. City Attorney Boone, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to go over before we move on?
Well, I'll just amplify.
Okay.
On the issue of the postings on the comment, I mean, this is a conservative approach. As I think when you were, I guess the term is onboarded, when orientation occurred, and then City Attorney Powell, I'm sure, covered the issue about what is considered serial meetings. And it's really a timeliness issue. So if you were posting a comment and then another counselor posted a comment and then you replied to that comment and the third counselor comes in, and if it's all timely, it's all kind of all occurring at one time, then if there's a quorum, that would be considered a public meeting because it's occurring simultaneously. To the other extreme, you post a comment and a week later, some other counselor posts a comment, another week goes by. That's not subject to that. So it's a timeliness component. What's recommended is, and these are just the guidelines for the council to follow, is that if you get to a quorum there, certainly think about it before engaging in active discussions. And maybe you want to give me a buzz or don't post. That's one of the two options. Don't create the quorum issue. So that's the one comment. It's a timeliness feature on that one. On the social media public record one, you can, as you no doubt are aware, that's a slippery slope. Some public officials use their social media for purely, if I can use the term, promotional purposes. But other times they're using it to conduct the public's business. As we know, sometimes public officials issue their official orders by tweet. And so then that really puts that into a public record, which then subjects the account and that record to search. Now, what the staff guideline is truly just conforming with current law. And that is that whoever is the person who is the custodian of that public record has an obligation to maintain it. That's the retention question. So we're not proposing to alter what the current practice is. If you wish to alter that, then we need to have a discussion about it. So that's all I have, Madison. Unless the council has any questions on my two items. Nope, thank you. Thank you, Madison.
Thank you. So then the last section of the guidelines, and I think City Attorney Boone made a great example. These are guidelines as suggestions, but again, it's not staff creating a policy necessarily, but a consideration. So the last section is best practices. These are best practices from city staff. And I think the most important thing to note in the theme of all of the best practices is just that all communications from city council members reflects the city council as well as the city organization as a whole. And that's true also of how we present ourselves as city employees and the city's accounts as well. So I just think that's an underlining theme to all those in general. So before the council, in my council report, I had some questions to consider, given that this is for feedback of if this was what you envisioned, if there were things missing, and then as City Attorney Boone has teed up the conversation about public records. So Mayor Buck, would you like me to go through these questions? How would you like that to be handled?
Thank you, Madison.
Yeah, sorry.
What does anyone have, before we discuss the questions, does anyone have any questions for Ms. Thiesing? Let me get my tiles up here. Okay, Councilor Winland.
So I understand concepts and whatever. What happens when we get into silly season and people are on the campaign trail? How is that differentiated when you start talking about issues that are affecting the city to differentiate yourself from a candidate or to promote what you believe in or things like that? How is that supposed to be handled?
City Attorney Boone.
Yeah, all right, thank you. You know, I think giving your person, we expect public officials to have a public viewpoint. I mean, that's why you're elected and that's why you're going to communicate it. That is not, I think, the conduct of the city council position, okay? I think the other side of it is, you know, if you were responding to a constituent concern, they wrote into you as a city councilor and wanted you to do something and you wrote back, I mean, that is, you know. And so the question is, where is that line drawn? I think if you're on your own social media platform and you are expressing what's clearly to be indicated, your own personal position, then I don't think that would fall within the public record, because the definition of the public record is indicated. Oops, let me go over there. The other one. It is the conduct of the public's business. And so I think a public official stating their political position is not.
So
the
Evan,
conduct.
the thing I could see being the reason these guidelines are important on that question that Councillor Winland asked is if anybody's using city created content on their campaign social media, then we run into potential violations of Oregon law.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought this was the councilor's own content response. I'm sorry. Yes, if we're using, the more it appears to be.
I mean, it could be. I mean, I think that's a great. I mean, you need to give guidance on that, because I think during a campaign, you know, a lot of things get used in it, you know, interchangeably, where it could be, and the incumbent person needs to be more sensitive, obviously, than somebody who's not elected. But you may be going back and forth where they may ask you a question about, well, where did you stand for such and such? And then you go, oh, well, here's where I, you know, we had this policy come up 6 months ago, and this is where I stood, and here's an example. So I don't know. And then do you have to retain all that stuff for 500 years? And, you know, all that, I mean, that's a huge burden on volunteers.
Yeah. Well, I think it's 2 years rather than 500. You're reporting your prior vote. You know,
I mean, it's going to be conversation, and it's really hard to. It's one of those things where you don't know when you're on the clock or when you're off the clock. But I mean, it seems to be when politicians are.
As long as we're putting, for those of us who use social media, as long as we're putting at the very beginning of whatever, you know, Facebook page or Twitter page, whatever, that this is opinion only, that feels like to me that whatever you say after that is okay. I mean, It feels okay to me.
Yeah.
Because I think that what John, what you're trying to say is you don't want any kind of endorsement or any kind of narrative being representative of, oh, the council approved that message, or if I said, oh, I endorse John Wendland for this thing, don't want them as the public assuming that I'm speaking for the 7 of us or the other 6. That's what you're trying to say, right? Which I agree with.
Right. Yeah. I just want to make sure that it's, I don't know whether you could probably have a whole nother addendum for political silly season, but I think it's on this topic, and that's why I'm bringing it up.
Good question, John.
And it is, and it's actually something that we went back and forth ourselves. And one of the proposals at the end is, depending on how council would like to move forward, I would also propose that we can find some extra training and find training that could specifically touch on how to handle social media with elections, but also records and how to go about this. And that would be from an outside attorney who is more geared to that type of topic. So we have those resources through the league as well as through our insurance company. So if that is something of interest, we can also bring back more training to council as well and clarify some of those points.
Thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
So thank you, Ms. Thiesing, for preparing this. So is there going to be a council Facebook page or something? For example, if we as a councilor get a question that's relating to city business, right? I'd like to be able to point them, well, actually, let's move that question to the city council page or something, rather than, so that gives us a chance. Otherwise, I don't know that we actually have a social media or like a Facebook page for council, something we can point
No,
to?
that would be the city's page. And I think that there is not going to be a separate, in fact, Madison and I have been on a sort of a very patient trying to have fewer social media accounts to increase the consistency among our various departments and to a single place. So no, I don't think we're going to have a separate account for the council. That's the city's page.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm just trying to think about how we can help to, when it comes to that kind of that gray area. What if we can have something very clearly not our official roles and official capacities? But I mean, I personally I don't have a page that, aside from what I did for the campaign and my personal page, I really don't comment on that kind of stuff. But I could see in the future, that's how some people communicate. That's how some people get their news. And so I could see how it would still be helpful. So, okay, thank you.
If the inquiry is about city operations, of course, that should be referred to the city department to respond to. And the city departments have their own departmental pages, and maybe that warrants an FAQ to be posted to it, if that's helpful for the general public, or they would respond directly to the inquirer.
Okay, actually, there was one more question, I'm sorry, about the original content for the city stuff. So I noticed on the guidelines that we should refrain from reposting original city generated content. So for example, if we were on our own social media page, reposted like the yard debris cleanup, that's content that's generated by the city. That's original content generated by the city. Is that something that we should not post? I mean, if it was a personal, I'm sure residents do already, but would you suggest as councilors not to do that, so as not to create that illusion that this is an official page?
So I think actually, so the sharing from the city pages is acceptable. So when the city's Facebook page or Twitter says Iron Mountain Park reopening, come join us, that would be something that would be very appropriate to reshare, but not necessarily a counselor putting out as an original post, Iron Mountain Park, come join me, hike with me, and has this whole city business content that was created by themselves is how I would describe that.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
And unfortunately, I'll just add on. I think context is the determinator on this, and thus there's no clear, bright line. The more your social media page looks like a city publication, the more it's going to be considered a public record, sort of thing. So occasional reports and saying that there's a city beautification project out there, fine, and you can credit. The whole goal of we put it in the city publications is to get the word out there. So it's okay, but if your web page and social media consisted only of or predominantly of city material, and it was not clear, that it's your own, then that could be more sliding to the slope of a perceived public record. And perception is also the line. It may not be reality, but perception can trigger the issues as well.
Thank you. Councilor Rath?
Madison, I've been waiting for this for weeks, so thank you for putting it together. Frankly, I don't know how many people are going to use their social media pages. I will be. I know Joe's using his, and I think this is super helpful for all of us. Actually, as a matter of fact, while you were talking, I was updating my Facebook page with this is my opinion, not the city's. So I was listening, but I was also doing. But I think this is hugely appropriate. And frankly, what a lot of us have heard from Lake Oswego is they want transparency. They want to hear how we feel. They want our opinions. And frankly, they deserve our opinions. And there's nothing wrong with us sharing our opinions. So this is super helpful for me because now I can actually engage with people on social media because I've been waiting and kind of figure out what that line is. So thank you so much. Look, for those of us, I think you should have some sort of personal outreach as a city councilor. I think people want it from you. They want to hear from us. Joe, you've already you've been sending out your newsletters, which I think are awesome. Please ask them to put my city email on it, not my Gmail account. But just for your newsletter too, if you put that disclaimer at the very top so that everybody knows, hey, this is Joe Buck the mayor, but this is Joe's opinion, just like my Facebook page. It's like, this is Aaron's opinion, but he's still a city councilor. So I think this is going to benefit everybody, but also really help the city, it builds trust, to be honest with you. And I think it's important. So thank you, Madison.
Thank you, Councilor Rapp. Councilor Windland?
So this really, I thought almost all this was really about deliberation. I mean, that we can't, which I totally agree with, that we can't be making decisions or formulating discussion outside of public meetings. So, if I'm not a social media person per se, but if I were and I wished, say, Daniel happy birthday, and then everyone else did happy birthday, is that serial deliberations to celebrate his birthday? I don't think so. My opinion is that's not city business, for one thing, but
Right.
But really it's really just policy and discussion about policy that we can't be doing. That's deliberation. Whereas information, we can use that as much as we want and deliver it. Is that correct?
I was all the way up. I agree with you. Everything you said. It's not city business. Posting to a static web page doesn't engage in conversation. If you're not, particularly if you're not responding, back and forth and sort of in real time or closely, it's not discussion of policy. But then the last little part you said, sharing information is not deliberation. I mean, it certainly can be. I mean, that's.
Well, like the example of, right, but like the example of Foothills Park opening up, or not Foothills, Iron Mountain Park, or sharing information, getting the word out there, which is oftentimes what we're trying to do. That doesn't matter as long as it's, I think, because I'm not going to rewrite it. I'm going to copy and paste, right?
Right.
Actually, that's kind of the problem, though. If you retweet or repost or like something, that's okay. I think to Councilor Wynn's question, it's when you take. Okay, I'll just back up and tell you a story. At Metro, we had in-house reporters, and lots of times we would send out stories those in-house reporters had written, and the pamphlet papers might publish them. And they kind of got in this ethical space where was it actual reporting or were they just taking Metro's press releases? And so I think that's part of the issue is if you're speaking for yourself and you repost something the city created, great, but don't take what the city wrote and post it as if you wrote it. That's where I think the problem comes up. And also, we encourage you not to share things that are sort of on the city's official accounts, but rather drive people to, because you'll remember that some of the challenges we had at the beginning of COVID was like there was a lot of different information out there. And so getting people to go to a consistent and reputable source. And also if there is a problem with what we're sharing, we want to have it because people came to us and said, hey, there's a problem here so that we can fix it. So really just try to decrease the confusion about when you're speaking on your own and when the city is speaking.
Arthur, you did something great in those last few months where you actually told us like, hey, would you share this on your social media platforms? So that, I mean, if you can continue to do that, that'd make it a lot easier for elite.
And things like promoting events. We'd love it if you guys do that. What we don't want to do though is have your opinion and the city's official position get confused.
Councilor Mance.
Oh, I am muted. What do you know? I find that if and when I have done that, if I put a link that directs people, you know, to the city website or to the city posting, saying, hey, check this out, or hey, you know, Woodmont Park is open, and have them go to that link, you know, an official city link on Facebook or on the website or whatever. That's always been successful. And then I'm not getting into the problem of having to crib things that the city said or put it in quotes. It's super easy. And I think most people now will click on things. Unless it's a direct share from like Instagram, I'll often do that. Not on Facebook as much, weirdly, but often we'll do Facebook shares through my account. And that's simply putting it out there, no commentary.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Mance. So it sounds like from, you know, this kind of this discussion, these questions, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong, that is everyone kind of in agreement with the guidelines that have been presented? They cover the topics.
I can pull those questions up again too.
There's then just one specific question, and it's in regards to the retention. So right now, you know, if we have what would be classified as an official account that we're using that where records are maintained and whatnot, we're maintaining those records ourselves, right? So for instance, my account, I don't delete comments, I don't ban folks, you know, it's because it's definitely used in that official capacity. And if someone were to make a request, which hasn't really happened to the city, but if it were to happen, I would, you know, go through and produce that. That's as opposed to the city taking our you know, accounts and linking them into a system that would do all that management. And then if someone wants requests, and city staff would take the time and do just like they archive our email and things like that. City staff's recommendation is just to keep the current system in place for the time being, where we manage our own, be more efficient use of city staff's time, and it just gets basically a little hairy if the city takes it on. So does everyone agree with keeping the current status quo of us managing our own accounts? Is there anyone that would like to take a different direction? Okay, thumbs up. Councilor Mans, Councilor Nguyen. Is that Councilor Nguyen? Councilor Boop? Thumbs up.
I'm sorry. For some reason, there was a glitch in my. I didn't hear the last part. So one time.
Are you? Is everyone just making sure everyone's on the same page with maintaining the status? Well, in regards, okay. So with all that in mind, I guess I'll make a motion that we adopt these social media guidelines. Again, it's not law, just guidelines for us to follow as colleagues of each other and as a city. Would someone like to make a second?
Second. Oh, Jack beat me.
Okay. Councilman.
So good.
Is there any further discussion before we vote? Okay, Ms. Linder, please call the roll.
Mayor Buck,
Yes.
Councilors Winland,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Raff,
Yes.
Boop,
Yes.
Mans,
Yes.
and Win.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Thiesing, for all your work on this. Great report.
Thank you. And then I'll follow up with training as well. So that will be the next steps.
And will that be like 3-week set? No, I'm just kidding. It's gonna be a
I won't give it time. I'll start working on it though.
no, I mean, how long? I mean, to train all of us, that could be a long time.
It usually takes about 4 years.
So we're going to start with
Right.
Yeah, remember, Councilman, it's 2 years, not 500 years, okay?
I'll bring in my 11-year-old daughter. She can tell us all how to do it.
Okay, next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. Item 7.3, Resolution 21 Tax 05 has been pulled from the consent agenda, so we'll consider that separately.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. We have approval of the meeting minutes. We have a resolution 21-03, which is our collective bargaining agreement. Firefighters. We have resolution 21-06, which is approving an appointment of an alternate to the budget committee. We had a member have to leave the budget committee for personal reasons, and that is everything that is on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Councilman.
Second it.
Second, Councilman Booth. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Linder, please call the roll.
Okay, Mayor Buck,
Yes.
Councilors Winland,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Raff,
Yes.
Boop,
Yes.
Mans,
Yes.
and Win.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-0.
And Councilor Raff, you asked for a resolution 21-05, the MOU with Metro on the multi-family affordable housing to be pulled. So I'll let you have the floor to.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Simply just wanted to give us until our next city council meeting to approve that memo, to give us all time to kind of talk to staff, get a better understanding of affordable housing. It really came from a personal need because being new to the city council, I don't know a lot about affordable housing and I want to just get educated a little bit more. And so just give everybody 2 weeks to talk to who they want to and then learn what they need to. And we reconvene, what's the next meeting? The 16th? And we do it then. So, and it sounds to me like there's no, waiting 2 weeks isn't gonna cause a problem with any kind of funding from Metro. So hoping we can all do that.
Okay.
I agree. I would like some more time. It was a pretty meaty thing to put on a consent agenda, frankly. But
well, we did have a study session on it. Just this.
Yeah, my feeling was,
Yeah,
I mean, I
but
personally had
that
5 questions, and we know if everybody has 5 questions, they can take 3-4 hours. And honestly, study sessions are great, but I think it's behooves everybody to get some time with city staff to learn the details. So it leaves the policy conversation for study sessions. So,
Councilor Mans.
Yes, I am on mute. Under normal circumstances, I would just want to get this through tonight. But given that this is a new venture for the city, given that we have a new council, given that we want everyone to vote, how can I say, with the most knowledge possible and move forward with this with the most knowledge possible so that the community is, so that we can answer any and all questions for the community. I would agree with Councilor Raff in this. I think this is a fabulous project. Please understand it has nothing to do with that. But for the very reason that I'm going to be in touch with Director Siegel to do not extra, but to allow him to ask questions, allow counselors to ask questions so that they can fully understand. This is so important to our city that I want to make sure that we do it right and that there are no lingering questions. And whatever the community asks, we'll be at the ready to answer those questions. So I, along with Councilor Raff, would beg indulgence of the council to put this off so that we can get those questions answered. Again, not that this is anything to do with stopping the project, but just to make sure everyone is on absolutely the same page.
Okay. Does anyone have an issue with setting this aside until our next meeting? Okay. Okay. Would one of you like to phrase that in the form of a motion?
I can try to move
Set aside.
move the 7.3 to the consent agenda for March 16th. Was that good, Martha? Good enough? Okay.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, Ms. Leonard, please call the roll.
Okay. Mayor Buck,
Yes.
Councilors Winland,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Rapp,
Yes.
Mbu,
Yes.
Mans,
Yes.
and Wynn.
Yes.
Okay. The motion passes 7-0.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda, we have a service contract to award, and City Engineer, Ms. Rooney, is going to join us and give us a brief on this emergency contract. Ms. Rooney, good to have you here.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Again, I'm Erica Rooney, City Engineer. And with us tonight on video is also Brett Beener, who is our acting water treatment plant manager, who was really the guy who made all of this happen during the crisis. So I want to make sure that he's a part of this. And if you have any detailed questions, he can get into that. But he really, we owe him a lot of thanks for making sure that generators were acquired and that we had electricity and we could make water during this event. That's the short story. You have the report in front of you. It got a little windy because it was a fun story to actually write because it was so detailed. But I want to just go over it real quickly again, the highlights if I could, and then be here to answer any questions you might have. I'll put it in context. So give me a second to share my screen. Okay. There we go. Hang on, I'm getting there. All right. Do you have just the one slide? Is that what you're seeing?
Yes.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you. So each one of these systems is just a little bit different. So again, this is a contract award for emergency electrical services, as we explained earlier in the attached report. I want to put this in context for everyone. Just so you're familiar, especially for our newer counselors, the water treatment plant for the city of Lake Oswego and Tigard is actually located in West Lynn. This is like a good trivia night question. The treatment plant is here in West Lynn, and actually where the water is pumped from is in Gladstone. We have a pump station called the River Intake Pump Station, or RIPS, is located here in Gladstone along the Clackamas River. So what I didn't put in here was the alignment of the water line that comes all the way over here to West Lynn, and then comes up Highway 43, delivers water to Lake Oswego, and then out to the west end to Tigard. So that's our system. This is part of the Lake Oswego Tigard water partnership. So it's co-owned co-owned by the two entities and operated and managed by the city of Lake Oswego. So those are the two systems I'm talking about in the report and in the presentation tonight. WTP, water treatment plant, RIPS, river intake pump station. So just briefly, event details and timelines, going over this again. It was Friday night when things started to look a little dicey for us all in the metro area with the snow. We lost both electrical feeds at the RIPS on the Gladstone on the river, and then the water treatment plant lost its feed from West Lynn. On the 13th, so that wasn't terribly uncommon. We've had it happen a couple times that we've lost power. We thought maybe it'll come back on, but things actually started to get worse. And so by the 13th, this is when our concern grew. The message was that this was a very big hit to the electrical grid over the entire metropolitan area, but particularly those areas in Clackamas County. And what we were hearing is that it could be several days before power would be restored. So we had to consider alternative power options. We quickly determined that our own generators that we had would not be sufficient because they're very small portable ones that you can pull behind a truck. And so we reached out to EC Electric for assistance because they have been working with us recently to do improve some smaller electrical improvements to our transformers, making some modifications. So they were intimately familiar with our system. We reached out to them, and Brett did all of this. I shouldn't say we. Brett did all this great work, made that connection with them, and they were able to find the right size of generators for us. Granted, it was going to take some time, and it was going to take some effort to get them to that location, but they had an idea, and they started working on a plan. And we set that into motion pretty late on the 13th, so that was Saturday the 13th. By Sunday, the RIPS was tied to the generator power by about 8 p.m. Because in the morning, I should say they started around 7:30 a.m. in the morning, and by 8 p.m. they had the generator powered up and working at RIPS. But then midday, we also lost electricity to the water treatment plant. And that's when things started getting pretty dicey for us there too. So Brett was finishing up at the RIPS, was finding out that the water treatment plant was now down without power. We reached out to our partners in Tigard during this whole event, and at this point we decided we were going to try our intertie with Tigard to reverse the flow of water. And sure enough, it worked. It was actually one of the easier things we did. Now, we could only get a little bit of water from them, so we knew it wasn't going to be enough to sustain us long term, but it was going to be enough to get us by when we were down without any power, while we were still waiting for the second generator to show up at the water treatment plant. So late on the 15th, we were tied to the generator power by about 7:30 p.m. So that was, on Monday the 15th, the holiday. But 3 very long days in there of getting everything up and running. And then lastly, final restoration to power in the West Lynn area. A lot of you may have seen that we had Highway 43 closed. That was part of it, was that entire corridor along 43 and in West Lynn in particular was without power. That was where one of our secondary feeds comes from. And that got restored very late at night on the 20th. So we're about 7 days into it at that point. Early on, as I mentioned in the report, we had said we were not comfortable coming off of the generators until we had dual feeds from both locations and had stable power. Because sometimes, as you may have experienced it yourself, the power would come on and then it would go off. So we wanted to wait until we knew that that was stable on both feeds at both locations. Finally, excuse me, and then this funny thing happened in Texas, not so funny, but they had their own disaster, which is where some of the equipment was coming from that we needed in order to take the generators off of the system. So there was a couple-day lag in there, but we did have the RIPS and the water treatment plant off of the generators and back on to the PGE power by Wednesday, the 24th. Just a few pictures. Brett was super busy the whole time, but he did take a moment to grab some pictures in all of that excitement. This, of course, is the RIPS, and the generator was going to sit between these 2 trucks here. That's how big we were planning it to, we knew it would be. It was the size of a semi-trailer, and I'll show you that in a minute. So here they are on that first cold day when it was just snow and ice and things were getting worse and the trees hadn't started breaking yet, but there was obviously problems. The electricity was going down. They're here underneath the trailer, hooking up these very heavy, about 4-inch diameter wires that eventually get hooked up into the transformer system here. These locations, as mentioned in the report, were not designed to have plug-in generators, so that had to be designed and implemented out in the field on a cold day out at both locations. And so that's the RIPS. And then we did the same thing at the treatment plant. By then, the snow situation was different, but the power was not back. This is the size of it. Again, it's the size of a semi-trailer. You can see that. They literally bring it in with a 18-wheeler. And then this is the back side of it with all of these wires coming out of it, cables, quite frankly, not wires, and into, again, another transformer system here. What you don't see is, we didn't have a picture of inside our electrical building, which is right behind here, is a vast array of machinery and computer systems that changes the power. I'm not going to explain it correctly, but it changes the power. It had to be reprogrammed to accept power from a generator, a different source of power than from PGE Electrical. So that was a lot of work. Again, hence why these were 8 to 10-hour days at both locations. And then this is how we were receiving fuel. Jubitz was a subcontractor in all of this contract. They're the ones who provided the fueling, so we didn't have to worry about it. They were very efficient. They were on time. They made sure that the diesel generators had all that they needed. And we did go through we estimate about 1,500 gallons a day, keeping the generators running. And then one last picture, waving goodbye from the treatment plant as they hauled off the last generator. So those are just a few pictures of what happened. And again, explained in more detail in the council report. This is our action tonight. We're asking council to award a service contract to EC Electric to not to exceed $400,000 for the emergency electrical services that occurred during the emergency snow and ice event that began on February 12th, and authorize the city manager to execute that contract. So with that, I'd be happy to do any questions. I'll quit sharing.
Thanks so much, Ms.
There we
Rooney.
go.
Thank you. That's a great report, and really great work. And yeah, I mean, everyone went through so much during that storm to know that even as we're all losing power at home and in our businesses, that our most critical infrastructure in the city, also facing that same issue. Really appreciate the workaround you came up with. And I don't know about the rest of you. I can barely get an electrician to show up for less than $400,000 to change.
Well, we felt fortunate to be able to have those connections, literally, and I don't mean that as a pun, but it was amazing. The timing was such that we had a very good relationship already established, and they were available. And the west side of the area, of the metro area, was not hit like this side of metro, and there were facilities or equipment available over there, so we were lucky.
And we will, if we can, we are going to seek FEMA reimbursement. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I did mention that in the report, and I didn't have it on the slides here tonight, but we have done the initial damage assessment. It's called an IDA with FEMA, along with so many of the things that are being submitted for the debris cleanup, because those are often eligible for reimbursement as well. So we're putting our request in along with other aspects from the city.
Great. Thank you so much. Councilor Mance?
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you to the team. It was remarkable that like Oswego and our partner Tigard were able to have water. We may not have all had heat, electricity, cable, but we had water, and that was amazing. So Brett, our eternal thanks for that. Director Rooney, well done. But my question is this, I do have a legit question, apart from the kudos. The question is, if FEMA does, if we don't qualify for FEMA, or that doesn't work out, or there's a shortfall, does our insurance in any way, shape, or form cover this, or is this one of those force majeure kind of situations? Do we know this? In other words, are we on the hook for the 400,000 if there are no monies forthcoming?
Yeah, usually the insurance company does not cover acts of God.
I didn't think so. Okay.
Nor is there a third party that caused the injury that we can identify. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're hoping, I mean, when we were doing the reading of the rules for FEMA, we're hoping that it qualifies in there. And we'll see. We'll see.
Great. I have every hope. Thank
Yeah.
you.
It's definitely worth a try.
Absolutely.
One of the things I do want to add is a good point to point out. I know there's a question about, gosh, was this competitive? And, I've been through a couple different emergencies here where when the stuff happens, you have to get somebody to fix it. 5 years ago, we had a sinkhole where time was of the essence. It was in the middle of 2 backyards and we needed to have it fixed now, or at least stop the sinkhole from getting worse. And so, we immediately hired a contractor verbally, which is allowed, it's a contract, and following the emergency clauses and declaring an emergency and things like that, we were able to get somebody on quickly. We did work with declaring the emergency, which is attachment 1 to the report. So that gives us the protections we need for that. What we did in this case, we also used the rates that were on a prior state bid contract. And so those rates were competitive. So I'm not too worried about them being like, they're not able to, if you will, gouge us because they can't use rates different from what was part of that bid contract. So we're comfortable with where we are, and again, extremely grateful for the amount of people that were able to come out. Brett had quite a bit of, there was a number of people out there, a number of different electricians trying to figure this out in the middle of the dark, in the middle of the night, in the cold, and we're just lucky they were physically able to even get there from all over the area. So
Bravo. Thank you.
Councilor Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Erica and Brett. I think, this is, we have to recognize our workers at the city, what you're doing. And I think these are things we should show in our newspapers and say that this is, if you had water, it's because Brett was there with his team to do this thing. And for that, I'm really thanking you. It's very important that we show what the city is doing, because for, many people criticize, but you have to show that, hey, you had water, because there were folks there. But I have a question. I'm not, like Joe, I'm very scared of electricity. So I have some story with electricity. So I'm just asking, how much costs a generator like that, or should we have generators there that would, because when I was hospitalized, it was the same time. At some time, I was hooked in the machines in the hospital and we lost power. But it didn't, it was maybe even half a second we had power back. So I could have my oxygen and everything. So I just could imagine if there was no, generators there. So how much is it like, my question is, you folks are the technician, more. Is it worth buying those generators in case of this kind of emergencies? That was my question.
Right. I think it's something we want to revisit, and I alluded to it a little bit in the report, but we looked at generators being on site for both of these locations when the original project was done and was completed about 5 years ago, for a variety of reasons: concerns about environmental impact, concerns about noise, a variety of other things. And land use codes. Both generators, both sites had complications with the land use codes at those locations in Gladstone and West Lynn. And it was determined that it was best to seek the PGE2 alternatives at that time. However, we're now 5 years into this effort, and what we're finding is that that is not a reliable source of alternative energy, because what happens is almost in any kind of a windstorm or ice storm, the electricity goes down all over the place, and that's not a backup. So we want to revisit this whole thing and look at what would it cost and what are our alternatives. Maybe we don't have them on site, but even having them plugged in, the ability to plug them in easier would be a step in a better direction. Because what's going to happen is we're going to have more snow and ice storms, that's for sure. But do we need to have the full system where we have a full-time generator out there? That's expensive for how little they get used, but there may be different options. So our goal is to revisit a number of alternatives again, based off of what we learned from the past, making sure we pay heed to that, and then determining what those costs might be now moving forward. And it's certainly something we want to talk to the oversight committee, because they're our partners in this, and move forward with that. But we're finding that this is maybe the third time, Brett, I think, that we've lost power, especially at the treatment plant with both feeds. And so it's not as reliable as we had hoped. Sorry, that's a long answer. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, it just took longer this time. We've had it other times when it'd be a few hours and then one of the feeds would come back. This time it just went out, and we know we were out for quite a while. So it's just the length of time this time that was the problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah.
I guess just to follow up to thank you. And we need to be prepared. I think even when we had the forest fires this summer, that's an event that could take out electrical lines and so on. And at that point, I wanted to make your point that I think was very subtle, but if we don't have water, our fire system doesn't work, all the hydrants and everything else. And I don't think, it's one thing to be able to flush, it's a whole nother thing to fight a fire. And I think those things, I guess what I don't understand is yes, there's probably zoning and there's rules and whatever, but okay, the water system goes down, we moved trailers in there because it's an emergency. I think we should be able to get over those obstacles because we just can't be without water. And I think the council would support you in anything that you need. Now, granted, it's West Lynn and Oregon City, so we don't carry a stick there, but I would hope that we would have some sort of a stick to prepare ourselves, because we just can't, we can't go through an event. And miraculously, we survived this one, and because of your really sharp thinking and your hard work. But my fear is, on day number 5 or 6, when we run out of water, and then we can't fight fires, that's going to be, or somebody's in the hospital and needs water, or whatever the case is. There's emergency situations. So I encourage you to do the work and do it as soon as you can, and come back with options. We would be supportive of that. But thank you again, because people automatically think that you can always flush and you can always turn on your water. And folks, this was miracles. So thanks.
Councilor.
Thank you.
Yeah, simple question. If FEMA decides to reimburse us, when do we find out?
It could be a while. I don't know their schedule right now. We just turned in our paperwork last week only to the county, and then the county has to turn it into FEMA, and it's a process.
We can ask the county, but we don't know.
The question is if we get reimbursed.
It'll be months.
This fiscal year.
No, it'll be months. Even if we qualify, it'll be months, maybe even years.
For the next budget.
Easily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman.
Yes, Director Rooney, is this something that we should agenda for an upcoming oversight committee meeting? So we can, well, I mean, also the generator, not simply the debrief, but talking about generator and what that would mean to the partnership moving forward, because this is obviously mission critical.
Absolutely. We have a very full agenda on April 5th now for the Oversight Committee, because just a debrief on the event plus the idea of getting support to move forward is part of that actually first item on the agenda.
Awesome.
So you bet.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we award a service contract to EC Electric not to exceed $400,000 for electrical services received during the emergency snow and ice event that began February 12th, 2021, and authorize the city manager to execute.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Mance. Any further discussion?
I want to be in the electrical business. No, I'm just kidding. Or contractor business.
Ms. Linder, please call the roll.
Sorry.
All right, Mayor Buck.
Yes.
All right, Councilors Winland,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Rapp,
Yes.
Boo,
Yes.
Mans,
Yes.
and Win.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Rooney.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you both. Great job.
See you soon.
Good.
Okay. So next we have information from council tonight. We're just going to give brief, reports on how things are going with the boards and commissions, fill each other in on what's going on. I will, and anything else that you all may have. I will kick us off. Talk about the regional advisory boards. There's been just a lot of there's been a lot of turnover region-wide in different positions. So lots of, and of course, canceled meetings, et cetera. So a lot of just orientation, I guess, to these groups. But at MPAC, well, I was elected to be the first vice chair of MPAC, which means I get to chair it next year, I guess. So that was something. And but we've only had one meeting this year. We're talking about the resiliency of emergency transportation corridors. And we talked about, we got an update on the Metro Housing Bond. Actually, good news there. They have met 54% of their production goals with only 34% of the resources, which is good. They have 2,100 units that are in production. And later this year, the first residents will be moving into those units. So it's good for the region. C4, we elected new representatives to JPACT. Councilor Heisey from the city of Milwaukee is our primary representative. Alternate is Mayor Ellis from Happy Valley. Two good individuals to have there on JPACT. At C4, they're talking about we got tolling program updates and update on the I-205 project. We're also talking about kind of the organizational structure of JPACT and who represents it for having a separate representative for the smart transit system, which right now exists in the city of Wilsonville. They'd like to add a separate representative, much like TriMet has a representative on JPACT. So just some organizational things like that. But we haven't really gotten into any big meet yet. Lots of legislative agenda, same for the mayor's consortium, lots of focus on the legislative session and what bills are being discussed. And then I would say the other kind of big topic is the tolling that is kind of taking place across these meetings. So that's kind of what's going on region-wide. Councilor Mans?
Yes, a couple of real quick things. First of all, I wanted to say I did attend the Lake Oswego Reads discussion for the book Cast. There were approximately 900 participants in that virtual meeting. It was very, very interesting. If you've not yet read Cast and don't have a copy of the book, please let me know and I would be happy to loan it if you can't get it at the library. The other thing is Parks Liaison. We have not had a meeting, as Council or as Mayor Buck pointed out, many have been canceled, but this weekend I took it upon myself in the sunny weather to do a tour of our two latest revitalized parks, Woodmont Park and Iron Mountain Park. I am happy to say that the number of strollers and young families and folks enjoying the parks was extraordinary. I have not seen that many people since pre-pandemic, frankly. People were practicing social distancing. It was fabulous. The work that was done was excellent. Kudos to everyone involved in that, our parks director, designers, architects, volunteers. It was really quite remarkable. So thanks one and all, and that will conclude my report.
Thanks, Councilor Mance.
Thank you.
Who wants to go next? Councilor Woodland.
So a couple quick updates, just to let you know on that, the 50 Plus Advisory Committee has been meeting. Unfortunately, they've been kind of sequestered because they are the group that the 50 Plus Advisory deals with older people who are pretty much staying to themselves. So there hasn't been a whole lot of activity other than one thing that they are connected to the Adult Community Center. And I just want to let everyone know that the Adult Community Center gave a report and reached out to a lot of our seniors during the ICE event. And that just, it really brought a lot of pride to me about our community, about how we do care and that we had touch points out there to a number of the people that got Meals on Wheels. Even though they couldn't prepare them one day, I think they were back up in the kitchen and were able to prepare the next couple of days. And so, it just is endearing to have our most vulnerable population. Not everyone got reached out to, but a number did, and they helped. So that's what our 50 Plus Advisory Committee is doing. Update on the community pool and activity center. There are some not a lot to report from the last time I've discussed, but a couple of exceptions. We've had a couple meetings, and primarily there to get input on the needs of what we want as a community. And there was a first survey that was put out, which we mentioned a few weeks ago. We had over 2,000 people respond, and that was to talk about the use of the recreational pool and what do people want to use it for. And we haven't had a poll response like that in a long time. And it was pretty close to what we were expecting, but it was affirmation. And so thank you to all those who did that. But there's another poll that's out right now. Go to the same place on the Lake Oswego Parks website, and it's about the dry land part. So not the pool part, but what we're going to do for things like a gym or a weight room or dance classes or things like that, multi-purpose spaces. So please fill out that survey. It's being pushed out by all of our communications groups. And at this point, once the committee gets more feedback, then they'll be working with the architect to give generally some guidelines, and the architects will be formulating a kind of a first proposal of design. And at that point, I'll probably have more presentation information to you. There's been some concepts. A lot of what we talk about is if you make the pool this big, it's going to cost you this much. If you make it this big, it's going to, offset this, and how to put it on the lot that we have up there. As Councilor Burdick knows, the architectural things, there's a lot in the planning part that people just assume buildings just erect themselves on a piece of land. Well, it's a lot harder than that. And so they're taking many considerations in. And so it's a great group. They're getting a lot of information in. There was a community meeting last Thursday, and it pretty much just went through the timeline and the background of the project, told an update of what we were doing. There's a question and answer period, and overall, the meeting went very smoothly, and for the most part, everyone was very positive. So that's it for me.
That's great. Thanks, Councilwoman. Councilor Boop.
Yeah, I missed one of the meeting of the planning, so I'm just going to say that yesterday I worked with Sid, and Sid was there with the Art Council. We went for a walk for the people's choice for the artwork, and we did almost all the beautiful stuff in the city, 5 or 7 of them. And tomorrow we have a meeting. Rachel, when is our meeting, the Art Council? Is it next week? I think
next week or the week after. I have to look at my calendar.
Yes. So yeah, we'll have a meeting there, and we will. Stephanie send an email. I think it will be on the 8th. We will have, add 5 more artworks to the People's Choice, and it was very interesting. I've never done that. I saw this. I always saw the statues and the artwork in Lake Oswego. I didn't know that it was that. It's very interesting, about the artist and, the pricing. They're doing a wonderful job. I was very impressed yesterday. So I said, I'm going to tell the council, and, it's, and they're good also for the money. They really negotiate. The art can be 15,000. They always ask for the, so these are, I was very impressed. And, as a councillor, I still realize that the city is doing wonderful work that people don't know about. And, I think I want to be the PR of the city. Huh, Martha? Okay.
You're definitely enthusiastic enough, Councillor.
Yeah. Thank you. So, yes. And for the youth, we have a meeting Wednesday. I missed I was at the hospital. I didn't do the meetings, So we are preparing the community policing and all that. So I will tell you next time. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have updates? Council verdict.
So I don't have an update for the chamber because we didn't have a meeting in February because most of us did not have internet to do a virtual meeting. So, but I do know that they've been very proactive in trying to work with our businesses with COVID related issues. So they've been really good about letting us know about different grants available and loans and so forth, and supplies. So they've been great. And also just giving out notices of the changes in where we're at with our levels and when we can start opening and so forth. So they've really been, I think, critical for many local businesses. So just want to do a shout out to them for doing such a great job on that. The Sustainability Advisory Network, our last meeting, they were really focusing on preparing to present to council at our next meeting on the 16th. So you'll be able to hear directly from them kind of what their thoughts are and how we should move forward in implementing the Sustainability Action Plan. So that, I have to say the group, just every meeting, very impressive, knowledgeable group. So I think that will be a good session for us in 2 weeks. And just to add a little bit to the Arts Council, they are working on building permits for the Gateway project. So that's very exciting. That's going to be down on 43. They have selected 11 new sculptures for the Gallery Without Walls, which will be put up this summer, usually August time period. So that's, again, something very exciting. And they have a new exhibit right now. So they have some photography up. So if anyone wants to go down to the Arts Council for something to do, I would recommend that. And they're working on securing RFPs for the art project that will go into City Hall. So they're, as Councilor Mbuk was saying, they are doing a lot and a lot of wonderful things for our city. So it's very exciting. So that's my update.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Councilor Wynn, Councilor Raff? No? Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Reports from officers. Ms. Bennett.
So I have 2 things. One, I emailed you all today. We've had a request from the Sisters of the Holy Names to write a letter of support for their funding proposal to have some of 10% of the units on the project that they're going to build on the old Merrillhurst campus be affordable housing units. And so I wanted to get Evan's given me some specific comments I think that are good for us to include, so we'll redraft with the city attorney's comments included. But I wanted to get your thumbs up to have the mayor sign that letter on your behalf, if you're okay with that. And so they're going to use this, as part of a grant request. Okay. The second thing is I just wanted to give you a quick rundown of debris days, and as you talk to people, to get your help, because I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is we have had 2 really successful debris days. Over 50 volunteers have showed up. On Saturday, we filled up 8 of those big container boxes with storm debris. The bad news is that we did it in 2 hours in both cases. So we opened the facilities at 9 in the morning and they were full. We did experience a couple things we're hoping don't happen again. For example, we had some folks who appear to normally be commercial landscape businesses that brought their debris so they could dump it for no charge. So we're going to ask this time folks 1 load per customer, unless somebody has done something for their neighbor and they brought their neighbor with them the next time along, so that there's some evidence that they're not just sort of abusing. Because if we fill up the debris with that material, then obviously our residents don't get a chance to dump. And the other thing that happened is that we had 2 drop boxes that got broken into after they were locked, and people put more material in it, some of which was unfortunately not material that we're allowed to take. And so, it's a classic case of please don't ruin it for everybody. And so if you could help us promote debris days, because we certainly want to have folks come. I'm grateful we had 50 volunteers. It's amazing. And we know how important it is to clean up your yards and walkways after an event like this. But if we could all just be respectful that we don't want our individual behavior to interfere with other people's ability to participate, that would be super awesome. So many, many thanks to Jenny Slepian for the work that she's done, to Madison Thiesing and other city staff, but also to the 50 volunteers who dedicated part of their Saturdays to help make the event a success. All right, that's all I have tonight.
This Saturday, right?
Yes, there is another one this Saturday, hopefully from 9 to 3. But once the 8 drop boxes are full, we have to close the event because the way it works in terms of folks picking up the material.
Right. Thank you very much. Mr. Boone, do you have anything? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, in that case, the meeting of the City Council is now adjourned. And the meeting of the Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency is now called to order. Our first item on the agenda is an executive session. And Mr. Boone, will you please take us through executive session
Are we
procedures?
supposed to go to a different link?
We will.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. The Lake Oswego Urban Renewal Agency will meet in executive session. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-662 E and F, which is regarding to conduct deliberations with persons designated to negotiate real property negotiations and to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. Representatives of news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience will be leaving the Zoom room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision will be made in the executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will briefly return to open session for the purposes of adjourning the meeting. I don't know of any other matters scheduled after that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Boone. So this will conclude the broadcasted version of the meeting. We're going into the executive session, and that will be it for the council tonight. So just, yes, Councilor Mance.
Can we take 3 minutes, Mayor?
We're going to take a, yeah, we're going to.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone, we have a second link. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll convene at 7:10 using the other link. in our LORA executive session meeting. Thank you very much. We'll see you
Thank
soon.
you.
Thank you.